thank you all for taking time out of your busy agenda. Afternoon, day 2 of DMEXCO. Hope you've had a great time so far. Our session today, we've got 30 minutes, so we're going to talk about, hopefully, a topic that is really interesting to you. And joined here today, so I'm Lee McCants, Chief Product Officer for Adverity. We provide a data platform that helps brands and agencies connect all of their disparate data and turn that into intelligence. So hopefully we have something to share today. But more importantly, I'm joined with Mariama. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is Mariama Commander. I'm the Associate Director of Data and Analytics at Barilla Group. My background has almost exclusively been something data related or data and analytics. But I'm super excited to be here not only as a partner, but also a massive advocate of all the work that Adverity do. But it's not a sales pitch, I promise. I'm going to give you some tangible things that you can use, that we've used within our company, within Barilla, to really improve the way we leverage data, clean data, and also eventually activate.
Amazing. And we're going to have a conversation. So it's not going to be a sales pitch from either of us. And it's going to be a lot of useful takeaways, hopefully, and the opportunity to meet the team after the masterclass as well. But let's get into some of the content. And I'm going to skip through that first slide. Here, what's really interesting is, as an industry, at the moment, we're now seeing some of the benefits of investments that we've made in our technology, in our data over the past year, 2 years, 5 years. And all of those benefits are coming to life with the help of AI. And what we want to really sort of explore today is how can each of you also go on a similar journey and take advantage of what AI brings. But the reality is that many of us, and in fact half of you sitting in this room, I'm fairly confident this cartoon will resonate. So we know there's this huge opportunity. We know there's real value in AI. However, as technologists, as marketers, we also have genuine concerns about the quality of the data. And to back this up, recently we surveyed 300 marketing leaders and anonymously asked them questions around what are your biggest concerns, what does your strategy look like, what are your priorities? And 48% of the respondents admitted that their quality of their data wasn't good enough to support their AI ambitions. And when we talk about quality of data, it could be incomplete, it could be a lack of awareness of the data available, it could be the very fragmented data across data silos, and it could be that they just don't believe they have the capabilities and the teams to turn that data into a real meaningful asset that they can leverage for their AI strategy. So if you're sitting here thinking, how do I navigate this challenge? How do I address this cartoon that sort of resonates with so many of us? That's what we're going to explore today. And we also have to remember that every single one of us in this room, in the industry, every company is starting from a very different point. We all have a different structure. We've all made different investments in the past. We all have different commitments with technology providers. We have different teams. We have different skills. We have different capabilities. But also the nature of our business is very different. So our strategy and how we want to leverage our data and investments really needs to take account of where we are and how we operate. And unfortunately, it's not as simple as A to B. So I can't sit here today and say, you're most likely here, if you do X, Y, and Z, you're going to get much more value from your data, and your concerns about your readiness for AI and take advantage of that can be alleviated. It's much more, it's much more, if you remember those sort of adventure books, at least when I was growing up about 30 years ago, where you'd read through the book and you had to make decisions at each point. And that's the journey that we're all on. It is a choose-your-own adventure. You need to understand where you're starting, and it's really, really helpful to have an understanding of where you want to get to. But at each point of the journey, you're going to have to make some different choices. You're going to have to make some decisions, and you need to keep that awareness of where you are. So have those choices helped you and made improvements, or actually have they sort of maybe set you back and you need to review? And that's where we're going to, Mariama's really going to bring this to life from her experience at Barilla, but also as a professional in this field. So there's lots of ways of looking at data maturity, and there's lots of really sort of sophisticated frameworks and models, and I think they've all got their place and they're useful. I really like something that's intuitive, that I can understand, and really sort of like, you can understand where you are and how you're leveraging your data. So we just put it on this sort of 4 stages. So if we start on the left-hand side with data, and then on the right-hand side of intelligence, the journey typically is, we all know what data is, and typically in our industry, it's disparate, it's disorganized, it lives in very different platforms, it has a different sort of granularity, it's available at different time frames. But what we want to do, and what many of us have been doing for many years, is turning that data into information. So bringing all of that unstructured, disorganized data, bring it together, and then you can at least start to visualize it. You can see trends. You can see what's happened. You can start to see, OK, we've made some improvements, or actually this isn't as performing as we'd like it to. But you really start to create value when you move into knowledge. So where you can actually understand why. The story that the data's telling, why is that story? And then what you're doing is you're applying context of your business, and you're starting to apply the human skills and knowledge of your teams. But where we're all very much focused on at the moment is intelligence. And to try and just put a sort of definition on that for the sake of today, it's the ability to make proactive, strategic, and automated decisions, and really amplify the teams that we have, and use technology in a way that we can do so much more with our teams. We can delight our customers and our stakeholders, and really take advantage of the investments that we've made so far. Now, let me just go back. Obviously, in 30 minutes, there's way too much information and best practices and guidance to share with you. Probably a conference in its own right, and we would love to do that. Maybe one day we will. So what we've done is we've created a really useful ebook, which, if you manage to stay to the end of the session, and I hope you will, there'll be a QR code which you can then download, and you can see all of the material across different stages, some best practices, some advice, some tips. That's available for free. You don't even need to give us your data. And so just wait, get the QR code, and you'll see all of the information available. So I'm going to stop talking now so much, and Mariama's going to really start to share her experiences. So today we're going to focus on data. So let's start in this point. And behind me on the screen, I talked about the research and ongoing conversations we have with our customers. There are many challenges at this stage, right? So this is just a sort of flavor of the types of things that customers are sharing with us. When we did the survey, these were themes that really came out. But Mariama, over to you. Looking at all of those challenges there, which in particular sort of resonate and sort of really stand out?
I think all of them, and probably most of you, especially if you work client side, it's a similar story, even if you work agency side. But the ones that really pop out to me are data silos. So oftentimes when it comes to putting the right types of data together to tell one homogeneous or cohesive story, it's very difficult. So we've got marketing data here, sales data there. How are we going to make them talk to each other? How are we going to align KPIs? How are we going to speak to senior stakeholders when we don't even have the data in the right place? So that's a definite bugbear of mine. The other one, as everyone in this room has probably heard over the last year or two, more so in the last few months, it's AI readiness. But the way that I see it, especially how it pertains to data, is I need good data to have insights and then overlay it with the AI. Because if everything is really bad downstream, how can I possibly tell a story? How can I possibly get someone to understand why this data is so valuable, why I'm collecting it? So those kind of two things usually stick out to me, and it's really making sure that we have a way in which we can speak to the business about it and have solutions for it. But when I say they're bugbears and they're frustrating, but the way that I always turn it around, because you need to survive in this data world, is it's actually an opportunity. They're challenges, of course, but we need to see them as ultimately, What can we do to fix it? What are the opportunities that we can use in order to be better, in order to get the data, in order to break the silos down? So I don't like challenges, I like opportunities.
I love that. And when we were talking and preparing for this session, I was talking about the challenges and the research that came out, and I was like really focused on, hey, let's talk about that. Let's talk about how hard all of our jobs are, and is the challenges are they becoming harder? Right, in terms of more data available, increasing channels such as retail media, is it getting easier? And Mariama was like all the time, like, no, Lee, you have to reframe it. You have to look at it as an opportunity. This is why we exist. This is our profession. This is our opportunity. So, and we sort of boiled it down, didn't we, into 4. So again, share which of these, from your own personal experience, sort of resonate, and just share what you've done at Barilla and your team to sort of really take advantage of this.
Of course. So the 2 that stick out to me, because they're all important, but it's the standardization of data collection and really the single source of truth. So I'll take them both in turn with concrete examples as well. So when it comes to standardization of data, when we started out, we wanted to build out a marketing mix ROI. So for those who don't know what a marketing mix ROI is, it's basically understanding how different marketing levers impact your bottom line in a nutshell. So you're going to need a lot of the vendors that you've seen in the other room if you've been in 6. So you'll need to work with Google, you'll need to work with IAS and all of them to collect the right data in order to feed in such a model. Now, the first issue is we knew the data we needed, which is very exciting. And then the opportunity came, or the challenge arose, that where is all of this data? And it was with our partner. So with clients, oftentimes you have an agency that might buy your media, you might own your ad accounts, they might own your ad accounts, think about Meta or Facebook. But how are we going to integrate that and ingest it? So that was the first challenge we faced. And then the second thing that we had to think about was, how is everything named, frankly? Because everything can be different. So if you're working for a global company and you're working with multiple agencies, the way in which you name one campaign that might be the same in every single region is different. So how do you make sure that everything is talking to each other in a seamless way? Not just from a Meta standpoint, not just from a Google standpoint, but think about Trade Desk. And this was a massive issue. Not a massive issue, we solved it eventually. I spoiled the ending. But we had to standardize it. So we had to figure out where the data was, how we were going to connect it. We had to figure out how we can standardize naming. And then finally, we had to figure out how to pull it together in one system so we could go on and actually create a product. And then eventually the insights. So that was the 4th thing that we really had to work on. So the standardization for us is where we had to find a partner that would help. So Adverity actually was already in the business, but we used them in a slightly different way to connect everything. And I wish this was an over-exaggeration, but my ambition was to make sure when we started 3 years ago on the journey was every campaign has a standardized taxonomy, irrespective of brand, irrespective of region. Tick, we did that within the year. We needed to make sure that everything was connected by way of any media spend that we had. Tick, we did that. And then once we got to that stage, that's when it becomes exciting. One of the solutions that we have is marketing mix. But the next thing we wanted to do was start finding other ways in which we could leverage this data that is now in a data platform to start enriching the analysis that we do. So standardization and collection of data is very close to my heart because I've seen it work in real time. I've seen the business impact it's had. And also, as having a background as a data scientist, the more data I have, the more ways I'm going to find to play with it. So it's also nice to be a bit greedy with the data that I've collected.
Yeah, and I think it's obvious that they complement each other, right? So you can't establish a single source of truth without standardizing your data collection, but it's not just about technology, is it?
It's not really just that, you're completely right. The technology helps, but it's also the people. So everything that I've just mentioned there was a reason why we were doing it. There was a need. The business needed to understand the important levers driving marketing and really driving the bottom line. But in order to do that effectively, we need to communicate with the business to first of all explain, why do we need this data? Why is it so important to standardize it? Why is it so important to name everything in the same way? Because they would just say, well, this is going to take us a week. It's going to take us 2 weeks. It's going to take us a year. And I'm like, yes. But in the long term, if you're able to quantify something so valuable as marketing, that oftentimes, if you're not having a D2C business, it's slightly intangible. But let's see how we can do this. So we put the business case forward. We explained it to them in softer terms. So we marketed back to them like they market to the general world and tried to explain it. So we needed to really have that relationship and the bond. So yes, we had the tech, we got the data eventually, but then it's really the partnerships and it's also the people and how we talk to them and bring them on that journey.
I love it. And then just to maybe give, without sharing too much confidential information about Barilla, how long has that taken to go on that journey to sort of really take advantage of these opportunities?
So I started 4 years ago. So it's taken 3 years end to end. So from standardizing the way in which we name campaigns, collecting all of the data, connecting all of it, having a QA system, building out a very large amount of models that cover a good amount of our business. It's been 3 years, and it's also embedded in the way that we work.
Amazing. Thank you. And then all of us should always be asking why. Like all of these investments, all these decisions, obviously competing for resources in an organization, for attention across different stakeholders, executive teams. And again, if we get this stage right, what do you really see, like, from a business perspective, out of all of the things on the slide, which ones have been like really true at Barilla and you felt a difference? Like things may be easier now to make decisions or get investment or to do things differently. Can you share some of your experience of these?
Of course. The two key ones I would say is consistent decision making and unlocking insights and opportunities. Oftentimes when we talk about data, and I was guilty of this in my first job, I wanted to make sure I had the best data to do the coolest thing and show everyone how cool it was and how complex. But as I've gotten on in my career, the reality is data should really be a catalyst to give you a solution and an answer to a business problem. So if you're able to collect the data and standardize it, the reality is then you're in the best place possible because you know the data and you know your business. So surely the logic is then you can answer the business questions that have been put forward. And you can do that through the insights, you can do it through predictive modeling, however you see fit to use the data, but ultimately you need to be able to have a consistent way in which it's embedded in processes within your organization. And then you can also find white spaces and how you can answer questions as well.
Love it. So second cartoon of the talk, and what I really didn't want to do is sort of make a pitch that, guess what, you've got to add more technology to your stack. You need to make an additional investment in technology. You need to work with another vendor. You need to work with another partner, even though many of you over the last 2, 5, 10 years have already spent significant amount of your budgets and seen maybe limited rewards and certainly some of the complexity of trying to integrate those different platforms and that different technology. So the answer isn't, the next step should be go out and look to procure a new analytics tool, a new BI tool, a new data platform. But what we want to do is leave you from this session with a couple of like really pragmatic takeaways in terms of when you go back to the office and you start thinking about, okay, that was an interesting talk, but how can I make it real and relevant for my day job and share it with the company? So we've left, the sort of final section is these sort of 7 key principles that wherever you are on your journey and wherever the context as a business, at least a couple of these should really resonate. So again, Mariama, from you, your experience at Barilla and what's led to, arguably a very successful transformation over the last 3 years. So credit for that. But which of these principles do you really want to sort of like add more detail to?
So I would say number 1 and number 4, I can talk to them a bit more. So starting with the business problem and not necessarily starting with the technology, or if you're working in a tech team or you're working in a data team pushing something that the business may not necessarily need nor want. And that may be a very, forward thing to say, but in reality, oftentimes we see things, we come to conferences and we feel like the business definitely needs this to solve a problem, which might be the case, of course, but also what's the business problem that's at hand? Is it a case, for instance, if you're a CPG, I can speak to this as an example, they want to understand how elastic is pricing for a certain type of product. Do I need a technology to do that, or is it going to fuel that solution down the line? Because the answer is, yes, I do need the data. So we can start off. Is everything connected? Is the data in a good format? How can I leverage it in the best way? Do I have the right granularity? Has it been quality assured? Do I have coverage across the whole globe if that's what you want? And then I can tell you if I can answer that business question, as opposed to a point of you saying, we need the solution, and then you start throwing out different reasons why. It shouldn't be the case. They've given you a concrete ask. I've used price elasticity as an example. It can be marketing mix. It can be something like, we just need a dashboard to answer simple questions. But why start with the technology when you can work backwards so it's more grounded in what they need? So there needs to be a lot of conversation and a lot of openness. And sometimes, especially of senior leadership or even within your teams, if you sit there, there could be a level of hesitancy just to put the business sometimes at the center because you're in your day-to-day. But within my team, what I try to do is, when I go there, I know they know their data science. I know they know the data. What I want you to understand is, do you know the business and how we're going to answer it in the best way and what we need in order to exploit the solutions we either have or don't have? So for me, that's one of the key, and oftentimes it's missed.
Great. I think it's tempting to start with the technology, right? I mean, just as a technologist myself, I think it is so tempting to have to pull ourselves back and really make sure that, you know, we're aligned with the other stakeholders in the business, not just marketing, the IT or technology function, but I mean, when we were talking, I think it leads into point number 4, the human aspect, partnering up with the HR team. You saw that as really beneficial. I don't know if you fell into that by accident, but you saw really good results by bringing them in really early. So, you know, can you share that example, you know, in respect to sort of the 4th key principle?
No, of course. So as well as making sure that you have the business problem and you can bring people on the journey, the data culture and the data literacy and curiosity is key, because as a data specialist myself, I know that data can be overwhelming. I love looking at data. It's what I've been doing for the last 10 years in my career. The more data I have, like I said, I'm going to find a way to use it that will hopefully be useful. But that's not the case for everyone that we work with. Just like not everyone's really savvy with AI. We all think we get it, but do you really get it? And that's not a question to put out to the room, but we all say we love these things, but then we sometimes leave people behind because they feel ashamed or they feel scared to say, maybe I actually don't understand what you're talking about when it comes to this. I find this really overwhelming. It's far too much. So it's fostering, first of all, we have culture, data, literacy, and curiosity, but it's also a level of safety. Do people feel safe enough to even say that they don't know? Because if they say they don't know, it's easier to foster that culture, foster the trust, and then you can move on to things like literacy and curiosity, but they're all in evolution. Because when you have that culture, that's where the HR comes in. It needs to almost be like a mandate when you speak about it. You need to have someone in the leadership team really encouraging the business to go to a point where you need to go to these trainings. Do you know the data that we have here? And then you can set that out, and hopefully over time, trust will be built. When it comes to literacy, it's not a trivial task, and I often see businesses talking about it. Data literacy isn't something that should be taken for granted. And I don't always think it's fair when we say data literacy, you need to have it. Because you need to know your business, you need to know where you're working, but you need to know the interpretation. In my team of data scientists, their job is to understand the data deeply, but I also expect them to have a deep understanding. So they have a 360 view. But if you're speaking to a counterpart in marketing, supply chain, they might only have 50% of that, but you have everything. So you need to be patient to really bring them on that journey in a space of trust and everything else. When it comes to curiosity, if you go in order, that actually comes last, because sometimes people, once they understand the data, that's when they can purely be curious, because curiosity sometimes comes in, I want something, I wanted it yesterday and you haven't done it, but there's a lack of understanding as to what can be done. But if you've got the trust, the culture, the literacy, once it comes to curiosity, that's when you have that real partnership. That's when they really start asking those nitty-gritty questions where you're like, oh, you really understand the data and you really know I can do something cool with this. So at the moment, we're still on the journey, I will say, but we have partners that are definitely in that curiosity phase. But it takes all of this fostering, working with HR, for instance, working with learning and development. But from my team, I want it to be safe. I want them to feel safe with me. I want them to feel safe with my partners that I'm working with, that there's no judgment. If you don't understand, fine, let's have a conversation. Tell me how you want to be taught, and let's figure out how we can make that happen.
Yeah, great. And we said not to start with technology, but I think it's really interesting that what we've seen is as a lot of these new sort of applications sitting on top of the data where you can start asking questions of the data in just natural language and sort of getting insights. Do you see that really sort of accelerating this data literacy? Do you see like teams becoming much more open to becoming like data practitioners rather than it being a sort of siloed team of maybe data engineers or analysts? Do you see like the end users using those tools and really like growing in confidence and skills?
I think so.
Great.
I feel like it's definitely going to streamline a process, but there's still a place to have conversations about general understanding, because at the moment you can use some of the tools that exist. For instance, you can use Copilot to overlay on some presentations that have been created to pull out insights in a simple way. It works. I'm sure I shouldn't be saying this about Microsoft. I know that they're next door. It works, but sometimes it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the case. It's the same with when we create models. We have 2 other people doing quality assurance to make sure it's accurate. Because if you put rubbish in, you're going to get rubbish out. And then it becomes quite dangerous. So it will accelerate to a point, but I would still not negate the fact that you're going to need some skilled people to be there to oversee what the AI is doing and work hand in hand. It's not a replacement. It should always be a process enhancer or a catalyst ever so slightly.
So there's no quick fix. You can't just sign up for the latest AI tool or product and put it on top of your data and you've solved everything. But I mean, the rate of change over the last 12 months is incredible. And just seeing what all of the different sort of companies are talking about today, very different 12 months ago, really different 24 months ago, really sort of pragmatic, real use cases. So maybe we just finish. What's next for Barilla on this journey?
So we're in a point where we're finding more fun ways to use the data. And I know that's not the most exciting and maybe sexiest answer. But as I've already said, when I see the data, I want to find new ways of using it. So we've already collected it, we've connected it, we've started using it to build out models. I want to find in other spaces where we can start using this data to explain really complex problems and find ways in which to find the right partners who are curious, that want to find out things that are slightly different. They're slightly outside of the bounds of what they would know otherwise without this data. So that's where we're at now. We're going to be being a bit playful with data, which is where you'd want to be ultimately.
Amazing. And so finally, thank you. I know it's a lot of content, and it's a broad topic to try and cover in 30 minutes. I did mention the QR code, and I was conscious I had to give you like at least a minute to get your phones out. And I did test it, so it should work. So hopefully you'll all back that up. It looks like you're taking photos of us, by the way, so it's kind of a little bit intimidating. And then finally, just to sort of, if you have time, stop by at the Adverity store. We're in Hall 6. We've got some beautiful swag, if nothing else. Look at the water bottle. You won't find the finer looking water bottle. But we have a team there, more than happy to talk to you, showcase some of the Adverity products, showcase some of our sort of different case studies with customers. And finally, I appreciate you all, again, taking the time. I hope you found it really interesting. I hope you take something away valuable. And you enjoy the rest of DMEXCO and safe travels home later today. So thank you very much. Thank you.